Welcome. Today we're going to do Parshas Vayeira. So, Parshas Vayeira starts when Vayeira El Vashem Beleinu Mamre, Hashem was talking to him, and then we have the whole story with the Malachim came, and he fed them, and then they told Sarah that she's going to have a son, and then we have the whole story with Avraham davens for Stoim, to save Stoim, and this whole story. So there's a big machlokes in this parsha between the Rambam and the Ramban, very big machlokes. So I'd like to first start with the Rambam, and I want to tell you what the Rambam's principles are about Nevuah, prophecy. So first the Rambam says in Chelik Beis, Perek Memvov, the Rambam says in the Meira that when a prophecy starts and then you have things happen afterwards, you can assume that all that is part of the prophecy. In Sefer Yeshaya, Perek Chof, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Yeshaya he should get undressed and walk, naked and barefoot, and he did that. And then the Hashem says, just like he walked for 3 years, naked and barefoot. So the Rambam says that it's not likely that the Rebbeinu Shalom told Yeshaya to walk around for 3 years, naked and barefoot. But that he said, just like in a dream, a person has a dream. The dream can compress a long time in one dream. You could dream that you went to a different country, and you could dream that you got married and you had children, and all these things, even though normally they would take a long time, but in the dream it could all be compressed into the same dream. And it's the same thing with a nevuah. When you have a nevuah, you could have many things happen in the nevuah that seemingly would take a long time, but it's really all part of nevuah, and everything takes place during the time that the Navi was having his nevuah. When Yeshaya, he says, Vayaz Ken Yeshaya, and he got undressed, and he walked barefoot, that does not mean that he actually did it. The Rebbeinu Shalom would not tell him to do such a thing, but it was all happening in his nevuah. When the Rebbeinu Shalom told Hosea that he should marry a woman of ill repute, and he should have illegitimate children, and he went and he did it, and he had the child, son called him Yezreel, and he had a daughter called Lo Yeruchama, and all these things which are symbolic of different things that the Rebbeinu Shalom was going to do. It didn't happen in real life. The Rebbeinu Shalom would not tell Hosea to go marry a harlot. He wouldn't do that. All this is happening, it happens in the nevuah, even though it takes place over a longer period of time. And the way you know that there has to be some kind of indication in the psukim that nevuah has come to an end. Like you see in Parshas Lech Lecha, by the Bris Ben Absorim. First of all, in the nevuah that he tells him that he should give him the mitzvah of making a bris. So at the end it says, "Vayechal ledaber itay, vayala lekim al Avram." Hashem finished talking to him, and then he left. The ruach of nevuah left him, and that signals the end of nevuah. By the Bris Ben Absorim, at the end it says, "Vayomahu koras Hashem es Avram bris leimar," and that is also a signal that the nevuah has come to an end. But otherwise, the nevuah continues until we could see somewhere in the psukim that it's come to an end. That's one thing that the Rambam says, one principle. The Rambam has another principle in nevuah. He says that a person does not see a malach. A person can't see a malach. A malach is a ruchni. A person doesn't see a malach. When a person sees a malach, he's having a nevuah. He's in a nevuah. That's how he sees a malach. And it's only in his mind and his imagination. But in real life, bahakits, when you're awake and not a nevuah, you don't see a malach. So he says the whole story with Bilam, that Bilam with with his donkey, and the whole story says that was a nevuah. It didn't happen in real life. The donkey did not speak. It was all in his nevuah. But how do we know? Because he saw a malach. He took a look and he saw a malach. Obviously, if he saw a malach, he was in a nevuah. And this whole episode with his donkey that was talking to him, it was all part of the nevuah. That's what the Rambam says. So you'll ask me why one of the things that was created Ben Hashmoshes was, I see you wanted to ask for that. One of the things that was created Ben Hashmoshes was the Piyah Asain. So why did the Piyah Asain have to be created Ben Hashmoshes if it never really happened? It's a very good question, and we'll talk about it when we get to Parshas Balak. There's an explanation for it. The Ramban vehemently disagrees with the Rambam. One second. According to this, the Rambam says that the whole story of Vayeira and the Malachim came, and everything was a nevuah. The Malachim didn't come. There were no. It didn't really happen. It was all things that he saw in his nevuah. Now, this nevuah, a navi cannot let's say he has a nevuah in a cholam, in a dream. You can't have two neviim in the same dream. However, Vayeira, it was a mara, it was a vision. So in the vision, you could have two neviim. So Avram was the navi, and Sarah was also a neviah, and the Malachim spoke to Avram, and they spoke to Sarah. But Ishmael, who appears in this story, didn't really appear. It's all part of the nevuah. The two neviim that were in this mara, they received the nevuah. And then, if you see at the end of this whole story, then he goes and he davens for Sodom. If you find so many tzaddikim, all this is also going on in the nevuah. And after that whole thing, it says, "Vayelech Hashem kashakila l'daber it el Avram, v'Avram shav l'makaymai." That this was the end of the nevuah. So from Vayeira until that point where it says "Vayelech Hashem kashakil daber imai," till all this was one continuous nevuah. The visit of the Malachim and Avram davening for Sodom. The Ramban is vehemently opposed to this, and this concept that you can't see a Malach, because he says that what happened when the Malachim came to Sodom. So he had the same question. The Ramban asked the question, when the Malachim came to Sodom, so the whole story that happened, Lot brought him into the house, and the people of Sodom, the Anshe of Sodom, said, "Give them out to us." They wanted to harm these malachim. So he says, even if you say that Lot had nevuah, a certain level of nevuah, the Rambam says it's possible to have a very, very low level of nevuah, like Hagar says was not a neviah, but she could see a malach because that was a certain level of nevuah. Maybe Lot also had that level of nevuah, and even though he was not the greatest tzaddik. But the Anshe Sodom, how did they see the malachim? Were they neviim? How could they see it? This is what the Ramban asks on the Rambam. So, it's a machlokes, fine. The Rambam holds that you cannot see a malach, and the Ramban holds you could see a malach. But the Ramban has a very good question on the Rambam. How did the Anshe Sodom see the malachim? So I want to offer a solution to this. The Rambam says in Chelik Aleph, Perek Mem Tes, he says that when he was expelled from Gan Eden, so it says that the pasuk says there was a lat acheref amisapeches. There was a flaming sword which was revolving, and that guarded the entrance to Gan Eden that nobody can come in. So the Rambam over there brings a midrash that there was no flaming sword. There was a malach there, and the malach, when anybody came and tried to come close to Gan Eden, then the malach projected into the mind of that person the image of a flaming sword that was revolving. So people got scared. They saw they saw this. It wasn't really true, but in their imagination they saw that there was a revolving flaming sword, so they were afraid to go into Gan Eden. So the Rambam says that sometimes a malach can project an image into any person, maybe even into animals. That if animals wanted to get in Gan Eden, the malach could project that image into their mind, and then they wouldn't go in. So according to that, so we could explain what happened by Sodom. So maybe they projected it into Loach's mind, but into Lot's mind, or maybe Lot had a certain level of Nevuah, but what's the Anshes Daim? So the Anshes Daim, the Malachim projected into their minds that there were people who had come here. Even though Malachim are Ruchni, they don't have any kind of material presence, but they projected into the mind of the people of Sodom that there were people that people from out of the city who had come to visit Lot, and that was forbidden in Sodom, and they came to attack them. Why? Why did they do this to Malachim? Why would they do such a thing? Why don't you just ignore the Anshes Sodom, come to Lot, and tell him that we have to take you out because we're going to destroy Sodom? So it could be that this was like a last chance for them, to turn away from their evil ways, that any guest that came to Sodom, they would torture them and make sure they didn't come. So now they were coming to destroy Sodom. So for the last minute, they gave them a chance. They'll see them as people. And what are they going to do? If they're going to just leave them alone, then maybe they will avert their destruction. But if they don't, that would be the last straw, and they would be destroyed. So that's why the Anshes Sodom saw the Malachim, because Malachim showed themselves to the Anshes Sodom as people and gave them the final opportunity to treat Archim, to treat guests properly, and not to try to torture them and chase them away. This, I think, would be a solution for the Rambam. I'd like to digress for a couple of minutes and to talk about a different topic, and then we'll circle back to this topic. People that don't know me, and they look at me and they see I have my payas rolled up behind my ears, and I wear a shtreimel and a bekesha on Shabbos, and I'm a 9th generation descendant from the Baal Shem Tov, and I'm also a descendant from the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, I'm named after him. They would think that maybe I'm a chassid. But the truth is that I'm not. Very, very shvach chassid. The reason why I dress this way is because I come from a line of Galtziana Rabbonim, and that is where I connect, and that is how they dress, so this is how I dress. I'm not going to put on a Litvish kapota because I'm not connected over there. I'm connected to Galtziana Rabbonim. The reason why I'm not a chassid is my grandfather's fault, my mother's father. My mother's father was an extraordinary person, Chaim Isaac Krasniansky. He brought up a frum family by the communists in Russia, which took a tremendous amount of gevura, and he was a very big skver chassid, and not from America. He was a skver chassid back from Ukraine, one of the few skver chassidim. And when he came here, he lived near the skver chassid, in the skver Rebbe, and when I was 8 years old, I went to him for Shabbos for the first time myself. I went and spent the Shabbos by him. That was before New Square was built. Square was a shtibel on Bedford Avenue, Williamsburg. My grandfather lived on U Street, and I went to him for Shabbos. So Friday night, we were walking to shul. My grandfather tells me, you should know, the Square Rebbe is Ruach HaKodesh. This is the old Alta Square Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Reinman. So he says, he has Ruach HaKodesh. He takes one look at your forehead and he sees all your Aveiros. He scared the wits out of me. A whole Ma'ariv, I'm sitting there and I'm afraid. After Ma'ariv, we go to Seged Shabbos to the Rebbe, and I am hiding behind my grandfather. And when we come to the Rebbe, my grandfather pulls me out. He tells the Rebbe, this is my anicle. The Rebbe looks down at me, and he smiled, And I saw right away that he doesn't see. And that was it. That was it. In that moment, I became a skeptic. After just in defense of the Square Rebbe, I do want to say that when he put on my tefillin for me when I was bar mitzvah the first time, and he told me that I shouldn't talk to my tefillin for a year. So I thought to myself, a year I could handle. I could not talk to my tefillin for a year. So I didn't talk to my tefillin for a year, and after that, I didn't start talking. My whole life, I've never talked to my tefillin. So, but then I found out that the Skver Rebbe told everybody else they should never talk in the tefillin. To me, he said, don't talk in my tefillin for a year. So apparently, he was able to look into my head and know who he was dealing with. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to be very careful what you say to a child. That, he told me something like that, and in my own mind I thought that it's not true. So that was it. So I became a skeptic. So we have midrashim. There are many, many midrashim that are really strange. Really strange midrashim. And most shittas hold that in general, the Rambam says this in the Vayeira, he says that Chazal used to conceal soidas or esoteric ideas of the Torah. They would conceal them in parables and and in certain ways that the people that understand could figure out what they mean. But they're not meant to be taken literally. The Maral, for the most part, does not understand midrashim, these type of midrashim, to be literal. Usually he explains them as being figurative. They're just being, mishalim or parables or metaphors. And even the Marsha, who tries to, whenever possible, to understand that as literally, but maybe more often than not, he'll also say that it's not meant literally. When the Gemara says that Oigma Chabasham was Oiker Harim V'toichnam Zeh B'zeh, he would rip out mountains and grind them against each other, Moshe says that's not what it means. The Rashba also has pshatim why Chazal did this. So midrashim, you have to be very careful. What does a midrash mean? So if a midrash means if it's figurative, if it's not literal, and today in the yeshivas and the Beis Yaakovs, the Rabbeim and the Moras use midrashim in their literal sense to bring excitement into the class. They make them very exciting, all these midrashim. And if that's not what the medrash means, then it's megala ponim b'torah shloik halacha. You're saying wrong pshat. You can't do that. And even if it does mean literally, but if it strains the credulity of the child, then it's a very dangerous thing to do. I want to read to you what the Sefer Chasidim, the Chassid, says. Ein megalen agoda tumua lektanim. You're not supposed to tell a strange agoda, which is either in the Gemara and the Gadata or in the Medrash. You don't tell it to children. Pen yomer ein by mamish. They're going to say it's not true. Ein by mamish. Umid halesa shad varim nami einam. You won't believe in this. You won't believe in other things. If you tell them a Medrash, and their reaction is going to be that, it can't be, then how do you know that they're going to believe in Kriyas Yamsuf? If this is not true, then other things are also not true. So you're really undermining their emunah in the Torah by telling them things that they may say that this is not true. He says, V'chein la'me'oretz, don't tell Ta'amoretz either. Shelo yaminu. They won't believe what you're telling them, so you shouldn't do that. So before a Rebbe or a Morah uses a Medrash, which is strange and bizarre, and tells this to the class, before that, They need to find out, either they have to learn themselves, learn all the midrashim, see just don't take the medrash as it is and give it to the children. Learn what it means. If it doesn't mean literally, then certainly you shouldn't do it. Even if it does mean literally, better not to do it. Pick and choose your midrashim. You have a question, go to your Rav, go to somebody, ask him a question. Is this a medrash that I should teach to the children, or is it not? This is very important because you can undermine their emunah. Which brings us back to Vashti's tale. Did Vashti have a tail? I once asked, I don't know, did she have a tail? So I once asked, the Aruch says she didn't. But I once asked the Choshevi, did Vashti have a tail? So he told me, and this is the correct answer, I don't know if she had a tail, but I know that she had something that Chazal called a tail. Okay, that's a good answer. What was it? Okay, so you have to investigate, you have to learn, what does it mean? But just to tell the children Vashti had a tail, maybe it's not. In general, you shouldn't tell them about Vashti's tail because she had to get, she was unclad. It's not appropriate to tell that to the children. But that's besides the point. But did she have a tail? I was once speaking to a group of young women who had graduated from seminary, and they were talking about different things. And I asked them, "Do you believe?" I said, a small group. Do you believe that Vashti had a tail? So they said, of course. We learned that Vashti had a tail. So I told them, listen, this is a safe zone. Whatever you say here is not going to get out. It's not going to hurt you with the shidduch. Just tell me what you believe. So they started giggling and they said, a tail? So apparently they didn't really believe it. So does that mean that now they don't believe in Kriyas Yamsuf? I don't know. But it's certainly not a good thing to do, to tell them something that, like he says, lo yaminu, they don't believe it. You don't know. A young man once called me up, and he told me that he had gone to read different books, and he was a kafir. He didn't believe in the Torah at all. Didn't believe in it, and he wanted to come talk to me. I said, of course, you can come talk to me. I think I could have helped him, but I didn't take his name or his number, and he never called me again. So, but I asked him, what do you do? He says, I learn in the kollel. He says, what? I learn first, second, third Seder with chavrusas. He learns in the kollel. So I said, does your father know? Does your Rebbe know? No. Does your wife know? No. Nobody knows that this person is a kafir, and he learns in the yeshiva because this is his community, and in this community you have to learn yeshiva. So he learns in yeshiva, and he doesn't believe a word of it. I mean, I feel very sorry for this guy, but who knows how many people in our community, because they want to be, this is their family, this is their friends, this is their community, so they do what everybody else does. But who knows if their emunah is really solid? We can't know that, and we have to be extremely careful to make sure that the emunah is strong, and we should not jeopardize their emunah by telling them things that are, that they may find not credible. So did Vashti have a tail? So I just like to address this. The Gemara says two opinions. First opinion, the Gemara says, Parcha bot saras. She got a rash, so she couldn't come because she had a rash. Okay, good. A rash is nothing very miraculous. The Rambam says in the fifth parak of Avos that the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't like to make nisim. He made the teva. He wants the teva to work. The Rebbeinu Shalom made a tanai with the yam during Sheish Mei Breishis that it should split, that there should be a Kriyas Yamsuf. He says why the yam is not a Bal Bechira, is not a Bardas. He can't make tanoim. What this means is that he built into the bria that the yam should split at certain times. That's what he built into the bria. So nisim are built into the bria. If we find nisim, they're built into the bria. They should happen. I find it not so why would he build into the Bria that Vashti should have a tail? What's wrong with a rash? So this is what the Gemara says. The first lashon the Gemara says, Parcha Batzaras, she got a rash. The second lashon the Gemara says, Yorad Gavriel Asalo Zanov. Gavriel came down and he made her a tail. Why didn't he say the same thing? Parcha Batzaras or Parcha Bazanov. That she got a tzaras or she grew a tail. Why does the Gemara say that Gavriel came down? So I think that what it means is that just like we said before in the Rambam, that a malach could sometimes project an image into a person's mind of something that's not there, but he'll make them think that it's there. So to make a tail is really, really over the top. I mean, you could just make a tzaras. But what happened here is that Gavriel came down and he projected into Vashti's mind and maybe into her ladies in waiting also that she had a tail, and therefore she didn't go because she thought she had a tail, but she really didn't have a tail. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say about this parsha, and I think this is a very important point. That in general, when you deal with midrashim, you're playing with fire. You're taking a midrash, which first of all may not mean what you say it means, and even if it does, it may undermine the emunah of maybe this young man that called me. Who knows if his first step on the road to Kfira was Vashti's tail or something like that? Who knows? And it's not worth it. You want to excite the kids, okay, I don't know, tell them stories of Gedolim or who knows what, but to tell them, to take midrashim that they may not find credible is really not what should be done. Anyway, going before, at the end of this nevuah, so the Rebbeinu Shalom says that he has to tell him what he plans to do with Sodom. Okay. So he says, Ki dativ, I know Avram, Asher Yitzavez Bonov, as Beisai Achrav, he's going to leave instructions for his children, Lasai tzedakah mishpat, to do tzedakah and mishpat. Now, in the first mission of us, it says Al Shlosh Dvarim Ha'olam Ha'amed. One of them is Chesed, Gemilas Chasadim. So the Mefarshim, Rashi or Bein Yoinda, they say, why does it say Chesed? Why doesn't it say tzedakah? So they say because Chesed is bigger than tzedakah, because tzedakah you do with poor people, and Chesed you could do it, anybody do it. Ashirim, you can give eitzes. There are many different ways of doing chesed. So chesed is higher than tzedakah. Now we know that Avram was the Amud HaChesed. He was the Amud HaChesed. So why doesn't it say here, Lasa is chesed tzedakah mishpat? Why is chesed missing here? Why does it say just tzedakah mishpat? So the Rambam in the Moira, the second to the last parak, says there are three things. There's chesed, tzedakah, and mishpat. It says, what is the difference with these three? So the Rambam says, chesed is something that you have no obligation whatsoever to do. You don't have to do it. Olam chesed yibana. The creation of the world was a chesed. There was no reason why the Rebbeinu Shalom had to create the world. He decided to create the world, it was pure chesed. However, once he created the world, then it would be fitting, morally, that he should take care of the creatures that he created. That's called tzedakah. That they don't really have a legal claim, but this is the right thing to do. That's tzedakah. Mishpat means something that you have a legal obligation to do. So chesed means you have absolutely no obligation. Tzedakah means that you have a moral obligation to do it. And mishpat means something you have a legal obligation to do. So if it was said here that Avram was mitzaveh bonov, they should do chesed, and it's mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, you have to, it's a mitzvah to fulfill the instructions of a person that dies, that passes away, then any chesed he would tell them to do would be obligatory, at least would be the right thing to do. So then it wouldn't be chesed. So he could not be mitzaved them to do chesed. He could only be mitzaved them to do tzedakah and mishpat. He himself was big bal chesed, and they should learn from his example that they should also be bal chesed. But he cannot give them instructions that they should do chesed, because if he gave them those instructions, then it wouldn't be chesed. Okay, a little bit further in the parsha. After Yitzchak was born, so Sarah felt that Ishmael, who was older than him, is a bad influence on him. So she convinced Avram that he should send Ishmael away. So there's a variation in the language of the pasuk. V'yomer kim el Avram, Hashem said to Avram, al yer b'necha al hanar. Don't worry about the youth, hanar. He called Ishmael a nar. So then he went. It says Vayitin al hagar samal shechma. He gave her bread and water. V'es yeled. He put the yeled also that she should carry him. All of a sudden he's a yeled. V'yichlu hamayim min hachemas, v'tashlech es hayeled tachas achad asichem. Again, he's called a yeled. And then she said, I want to sit far away. Al ereb b'mois hayeled. I don't want to see the yeled die. V'yishmel akim el koil hanar. And now we're back to a nar. 3 psukim, 3 times it calls him a yeled. First it says a nar, then 3 times a yeled, and then it calls him a nar. What does this mean? So I would like to explain this according to a Gemara in Chul and Daf Chav Dalet. The Gemara over there talks about, I haven't get into it, the question of Gabi Tumah. The Gemara says that there's a difference between a zoken and a yeled. So the Gemara says, Ma yeled. What is a yeled? So the Gemara says, he could stand on one foot and tie his shoe. Stand on one foot, lift the other foot, and tie his shoe. That's a yeled. Rav Chanina ben Dosa said that I was able to do that when I was 80 years old. So the word yeled means an athlete, a strong fellow. That's what yeled means. So why was he? And these 3 psukim, they're all talking about his debility. He couldn't walk. Hagar had to carry him on her shoulder. She put him down because by Achad Asichem because he was fainting. She said, I don't want to see him die. These psukim are talking about his debility. Why was he debilitated? So Rashi says that Sarah gave him an ayin hara, she gave him a klala, that he should be Shechnisa by Sarah ayin ra, v'chazosei chema. She gave him an ayin hara, and he got a very high fever. So his debility came from Sarah's klala. So what the pasuk is telling you, that in these 3 psukim that talk about his debility, these 3 psukim are telling you he was a yeled. It's not that he was this little weakling. He was a yeled. Ishmael was a strong guy. And even though he was a strong guy, Hagar had to carry him on the shoulder, and he was running the high fever. She was afraid he's going to die. But when we talk about him, we talk about him as a nar. By Yishmael Akim, we'll call a nar. We talk about him as a nar. In conclusion, I would like to say something about the Akedah. There's like a tremendous amount to say about the Akedah, and maybe next year we'll talk about the Akedah, Mirz Hashem. But I'd like to say what the Rambam says about the Akedah. The Akedah showed the world Avram's devotion. It showed him that he was ready to sacrifice his son to Rebbeinu Shalom. But the Rambam says that there was another thing, there was another purpose in the Akedah. The purpose of the Akedah was to demonstrate for all future generations what is prophecy. Prophecy, you would think a person has a prophecy. So maybe he has questions, maybe he's not sure what he heard, maybe he didn't understand, maybe this. So he's saying Avram, when he had his prophecy to sacrifice Yitzchak, if he had had the least possible doubt that maybe he was wrong, and maybe the prophecy that he was hearing was not really what he thought it was, then in no way would he have taken Yitzchak and brought him up and tried to sacrifice him. So this proves that when a Navi has a Nevuah, it is so real to him, it's as if it's more vivid, more real than anything in real life. It is 100% sure, and all the Nevi'im that are going to be say Nevuah to Klal Yisrael, all the future generations, you could assume that their Nevuah is, unless they're a Navi Sheker, but the true Navi, you could assume that his Nevuah is 100% true, that it came from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and there are no Sfeikas in the Nevuah. That was established by Avraham, because maybe another Navi, maybe that's what he thinks, so he's warning people to tshuva. He's not sure, but he thinks so. But what Avraham showed is that Nevuah is 100% sure. Definitely happened. And this is one of the lessons. It's not, the Rambam doesn't say it as the main lesson, but he says it's also one of the lessons that we learn from the Akedah. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again next week.